All right. Well, it looks like we are live here. So thank you so much for joining. If you haven't been here before, we're going to be doing a live question and answer. This can be for OCD, can be for anxiety. And I've got Natasha Daniels here with me. She is an amazing person. Obviously, I want to get her on here to give you guys really good answers and to help you out. I know typically people kind of like introduce the other person, but I feel like Natasha knows herself way better than I do. And so maybe you can introduce yourself and let us know like who you are and
sure.
All that.
Yeah. Well, my name is Natasha Daniels, and I am an anxiety and OCD child therapist. And I am the creator of AT Parenting Survival. So I've got a YouTube channel and a podcast, and I have 3 kids with anxiety and OCD. And I spend my time helping parents help their kids with anxiety and OCD.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, your YouTube channel is amazing. So I remember watching your videos and I'm like, I want to do that. And so you're definitely one of the inspirations for me doing mine. And
I like
you have stuff coming out every single week, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, go to that channel. What is the channel name?
I think it's Ask the Child Therapist. But I think if you just put in Natasha Daniels, it'll pop. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
And so, yeah, so what we're going to do here, we'll answer questions the best that we can, but just to kind of know that this isn't therapy for you. This isn't us saying, oh, you need to go do this and because they told me to do it online. It's actually just kind of general information and just kind of have that as a disclaimer for you. And if you're asking a question, please try to keep it in one little block so we can see the whole question. And I'm just going to pull them up here on the screen and we'll just try to answer the best that we can. So let me just find this first question for us. We got this right at the top. So besides ERP, what else can somebody with OCD do to work on his or her self-esteem, self-confidence, and all those mental foundations that OCD might have negative effects on? This is a good question. I tend to, when I work with OCD, is like I tend to just like focus on OCD. Sometimes forget about the rest of life and self-esteem and self-confidence. I talk about building foundations quite often. Like if the foundation isn't strong, then treatment often isn't going to be strong. I know I'll kind of give my idea of at least what I do is I have people really understand like why are they choosing to do treatment in the first place? Why is it worth it to you? What's the pros? What's the cons to it? Building self-esteem usually doesn't come from somebody else saying, hey, you can do it. You're going to be great. It's usually from within, which is why they call it self-esteem, that we have to see even the small little wins that we have and see that progress. And sometimes I have people write those down on a sticky note and put it on their wall, and then write the next one and put it on their wall. And then they see this thing just grow, that they're like, I'm actually doing really awesome. And sometimes it's using that feedback and those ideas as well of like, how am I doing awesome today? And even boast about my successes. And so there's at least one idea that I have individuals do. Any thoughts, Natasha?
Yeah, sorry about the noise. I'll be quiet in a minute. You know, I feel like this is such a good question because like you said, we don't really focus on self-esteem per se when we're doing ERP or as an ERP therapist. But, you know, when you have themes that attack who you are, whether you're a good person or not, it can't help but attack your self-esteem. So I do feel like, I love the way you said, like, it's self-esteem because no matter what anyone else says, you have to boost your own self-esteem. You can't get it externally. So I think finding out and defining who you are besides OCD, you know, who are you besides working on ERP? And that's what I do with my kids too. Who are you besides doing your exposures? So I think, and I like your idea of maybe making a list, even though that can seem kind of cheesy, and figuring out, you know, I'm an awesome friend. You know, I'm really empathetic, or I'm really good at jewelry making, and finding out your traits and the things that define you both skill-wise and just personality-wise.
That's perfect. I love that. I have OCD. My current theme is feeling like I'm developing schizophrenia. I realize I can change the sound or tone of my inner voice, and now I feel like I'm hearing voices in my head. Is this common? Well, I know it's pretty common, this theme specifically, that many people have it. I think what the brain loves to do, just any OCD topic, is make people worry and doubt and question everything, to say, uh-oh, this one's different. Something seems different about this. I can change the tone of the sound in my voice. So it must mean something, when it might be something people have been doing all along. They just didn't put any value to it. And, I just know OCD attacks what people care about. And so, and it's going to make people check. This is one of those that people really, really check. How am I thinking? Do I actually hear something? Do I not hear something? What is the tone? This must mean something. That, just like any other type of OCD, it's going to make you question, make you question, make you question. And so I know it's something that is pretty common that I see, but we try not to put any value to it, to say, oh, okay, well, Nate told me that this doesn't have much value, and so so now it doesn't. But what happens is the brain tends to just try to find the next thing to make the person doubt or question. And so we try not to problem solve it, really.
Yeah, and I agree. Just to put my 2 cents. I think there's no answer that will satisfy OCD. So no matter what we say, OCD will be like, yeah, but maybe they didn't fully understand the question. Let me ask it again. So
yeah, good point. I've got a little fly just like flying around me. Be our little buddy. How to deal with racist obsessions and feelings of embarrassment that come with it. This is something that I see, and I see it in my practice. A lot of people can sometimes misunderstand this. Of course, there can be some embarrassment that comes from talking about that. And what I say is, like, sometimes even feelings have no value, which sounds strange. Like, not that your feelings don't have value, but feelings that we have when it comes to OCD or anxiety, sometimes I see as false signals. Like, it wants me to feel embarrassed because it wants me to put a lot of value on this. I always say do treatment when it comes with this. And I don't know, Natasha, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, OCD thoughts are not your thoughts, right? So they don't define you. I mean, by the nature of what they are. And OCD loves to, she really doesn't, this would really make her embarrassed. Let me just glom onto that. So I think when you separate that out, then it's, in a perfect world, not as embarrassing, because of course it's going to pick something that you do not represent because you care about that. Yeah, and any good therapist who's an OCD therapist will know that too. But I get that it's embarrassing because it's going to find the most embarrassing things, and things that do not resonate are incongruent with who you are, because that's what it does.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I'm currently having decreased anxiety on obsessive thoughts. Also, overall mood and concentration is reduced. Is this a possibility of getting better from OCD or slightly turning into depression? Make sure I understand the question. But I know when individuals start decreasing their anxiety, hopefully through treatment, they start discovering other emotions that sometimes they haven't noticed before. They're like, wow, I didn't realize I was depressed this whole time, but OCD kind of overshadowed everything. I know that when people are starting to question different things, especially with anxiety, they're like, wait a second, if I don't see immediate danger, my brain might be playing a trick on me right now. And so you kind of think about, even a question like this, is it something that I'm just kind of curious about, or is my brain like, you have to know these moods that you're having or concentration is reduced, it must mean something. Sometimes even things like this, we try not to figure out too much and just say, let's enjoy life, let's live life, what's going on right now in my specific life. it might not be a good, satisfying answer, but sometimes it's a hard question because we don't know the whole aspect of maybe what you're going through as well. I have ADHD and gained OCD behaviors after taking stimulants to help with ADHD. So do you know much about ADHD, Natasha? I know you work a lot with kids. But...
Yeah, because I work with kids. It's often a comorbid condition. But, I would say stimulants don't cause OCD. But if you have a predisposition genetically to get OCD, it definitely can bring on those symptoms. I mean, obviously, we're not here to give medical advice, so talk to your psychiatrist. But I do see that a lot. And so it's finding a different medication that doesn't exacerbate the OCD, but it doesn't create OCD. And I think sometimes people think that, and it doesn't have the ability to do that. That'd be scary.
For sure. I like that. It's, you always talk to your prescriber, psychologist, psychiatrist about it. But something I've seen pretty often actually is somebody who might have OCD and they also have ADHD and they start taking a stimulant. All of a sudden OCD symptoms start to rise a little bit. And not everybody, but they're like, man, this made my OCD a lot worse, or it created it when really it was either always there, maybe it just wasn't pronounced. And it's hard to know. It's always, get diagnosed by a trained professional for sure. But I love your answer. Like, it's usually one of those things that you work with your doctor to figure out, maybe this isn't the best thing for me. Maybe there's a different option. I don't know, but we can always do treatment for OCD at the same time. I'm dealing with OCD that makes me feel abnormal physical urge to urinate. And I'm finding it tricky to deal with it, as I don't know OCD can affect you physically too. Any ideas? Have you had experience with physical symptoms because of OCD?
She's in the next room and I live with her. And she has sensory motor OCD, which where like you, she feels like she has to pee all the time. And so she's getting false signals. And so a lot of people get physical, because it's not just about fear, right? It could be an intrusive thought or feeling. And so, yes, we actually have that in our house. And a lot of people have that, where they have this false signal that their bladder is full. And so we do exposures around that and see how far she can go. That would be in the realm of normal to hold her pee. And she ignores the discomfort that it can bring because OCD wants her to pee.
Right. So some exposures people tend to do, depending on the person, is like, if I feel like I'm going to pee when I'm out in public and I can't find a bathroom, and maybe I'll drink more water before I go. Or maybe I want that sensation that I have. It definitely can cause physical sensations, but we don't put much value to the sensations other than, like, unless we see a problem over and over and over again. But I love that, the sensory motor OCD. Yeah, definitely people can feel sensations, and we do treatment with it just the same. It's a good question. I actually get asked this type of question pretty often. OCD that stemmed on particular theme after witnessing a traumatic event. Any comments on the cause of OCD on a particular theme related to trauma? Well, I know, everyone kind of has a different thought or opinion, but I usually don't see traumatic events that, like, this is why I have this specific theme or topic. It seems just because it attacks a person's value system, whatever it happens to be. And I know, obviously, as traumatic moments happen in somebody's life, that, like, OCD symptoms can present, but it didn't cause that specific theme, at least in my opinion or my thoughts. And sometimes we get really caught up in, like, why do I experience this? And that can be a really big obsessional piece all on its own. It's just why? When really it's like, sometimes it doesn't matter why. What matters is you're experiencing it right now, and what can we do about it? That's what is the most important part. Because we don't live in the past, we live in the present. And so treatment is exposure and response prevention is the gold standard treatment for OCD specifically. I know people do that for trauma as well. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I think sometimes people really obsessively look for the cause, and OCD is highly genetic and it's opportunistic. And so when there is trauma in our life, or there was that genetic seed that was ready to sprout that we weren't aware of, it will hold on to that trauma and make that a theme for a little while, and then it might move on. And we had a trauma in our life, and OCD was very opportunistic and was like, let's make this a compulsion. This sounds good. Let's deal with magical thinking around it. And but it wasn't the trauma that caused the OCD, but it was another opportunity for OCD to cause discomfort. And it's the same, going back to ERP and doing that kind of work.
Yeah. So I like that word, opportunity, for it to arise.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with internal compulsions, and sometimes it feels like I do them and not even realizing. Could you give me some advice on how to deal with it? Well, seems like a lot of people have a difficult time understanding these internal compulsions, which most of the time for people are rumination. I'm just thinking and problem solving, trying to figure it out and wonder why. And is there anything that you do, at least for the kids or even parents that you work with, Natasha, that help them with kind of these internal compulsions?
Yeah, and I have my own anxiety disorder, so I can relate to this on a personal level. I think mindfulness helps, because then I'm really aware of my thoughts in not a bad way, but when you're aware of what's going on in your world and you're in the moment, you also will be aware of those internal compulsions, because they're not going to just randomly be happening, because you're kind of gatekeeping and you're like, that's interesting. Now I'm actually, doing this compulsion in my head, and I'm aware of it. And now I'm going to undo it and mess it up and, poke back at OCD. So I think a lot of it is ironically living in the moment and being really aware. I'm very aware of my social anxiety little talk. It'll be like, oh my gosh, I think they just thought that was stupid. And I'm like, I heard you. I can hear you, and I'm aware of that, and I'm not going to avoid that now. I'm actually going to walk towards it because I was aware of that thought. So I think it's that awareness.
I like that. So being aware is really tough to do. Yeah. Sometimes I look at internal sensations of, well, when I'm going through this, am I feeling anxiety? And just noticing certain triggers, certain times of the day. I tend to ruminate at nighttime or when I'm in the car. I'm going to really pay attention when I'm in these areas to pay attention to the thoughts that are going through my head, and trying to respond differently to them. That's the biggest key to it. We're just like rolling through these. I have really vent OCD in a relationship. How do I distinguish accepting uncertainty with an event versus normalizing a bad event like cheating? That directly impacts my partner relationship and is owed. So really vent OCD tends to attack what, real events. That's kind of why it's called real things that have happened, whether it's cheating in a relationship or, it can be something really, really small. I had a thought while I was around somebody 10 years ago, and I don't know if that makes me a bad person. It could just literally be anything. I know that we can definitely normalize bad experiences. And for me, when we normalize a bad experience, we learn from the experience. What can I learn from something that happened that was real in my life? And if I can learn from it and do something different about whatever I've learned, and those thoughts keep coming back, then I know, wait a second, maybe this is OCD related because I've already learned from it. I've already experienced it. I've already done what I feel like I needed to do, but it keeps coming back. And it's making me question and doubt everything. So especially with anxiety, because we're thinking about a bad event or what should I do? Should I stay in the relationship? Should I not? It tends to just be thinking. And if I'm doing more than thinking, I'm obsessing, I'm ruminating and feeling lots of anxiety, it might be something different where that's how I kind of see the separate between the two is one has a lot of anxiety and the urge to figure it out right now. And the other one is just general thinking like, man, this is a horrible situation in my life. What can I learn from it?
I love that answer because I think it's true. It's like you should see some progress or some processing because bad things do happen and it's okay to process them. It's okay to be concerned. Will this happen again? Or to have those thoughts. But it's like, it's that movement that you're talking about that I think it's hard when you have OCD because you don't really, you discount even the normal stuff of like, yeah, it's okay to process this. This might be upsetting for a little while. And then am I progressing?
Yeah, perfect. Looks like a parent. How do I help my 17-year-old daughter with exhaustion? Did I say that word right? Trying to cope with A levels, thinking about uni, which I think is college, issues with friends. Sorry, I don't know the lingo. Different countries.
UK
in the UK. Issues with friends while dealing with awful Harm OCD. It's all very overwhelming at the moment. I had to look that up the other day. I was like, what does ATM mean at the moment? Figured it out.
My kids make fun of me because I'll be like, what's this? You don't know that?
I was like, you're going to an ATM? Why do you keep saying that? But I figured it out.
That's good.
And so since you work with parents quite often, any thoughts on how to help a 17-year-old with that?
Well, and I recognize Kate because she's in my series right now. So, hey, Kate, thanks for showing up. I think, again, it goes back to kind of what we've been talking about in that series is that we don't have the power to control our kids' emotions, like that she has to develop her coping skills. So all you can do is present to her or help her recognize, okay, you're going through all this stress and you've got Harm OCD. What are some ways that you can de-stress? What works for you? And you can give her those tools. And then she has to be the one to start to clue in and recognize that. So it's finding her some good resources, whether it's online or in books, and getting her to identify that. And then separate yourself, right? Because you don't want her exhaustion and her overwhelm to be your overwhelm, because then you're not the anchor.
I like that. That's a really good idea. Anchor. Some of those words just like click with me. Like, if I'm not strong and doing what I'm doing, it's hard to help somebody else.
Yeah.
We mentioned sensory motor OCD earlier. How do you deal with sensory motor OCD, the breathing one? So that's a sensation possibly this person's feeling. I either see this kind of in one or two ways. One of them, I'm really noticing every single breath that comes my way. And then the other one is like, I don't want to notice it. One is I do want to notice it. The other one is I don't want to notice it. And so depending on which one it is, maybe we have different ideas on this, Natasha, but and probably the same. But either way, at least for me, I try to just say, if I don't want to notice it, then I'm actually going to notice it on purpose. And I want to notice it and say, yeah, I love it. Every single breath that's coming my way, this is amazing. I hope it keeps ruining my day. I hope it joins me at work. I hope I notice it in my sleep. I don't want it to go away. I mean, that's a super, super simplified version of it. If it's the other one where like I have to notice it, usually the fear is like, well, why? Like, I have to notice it because I'm worried I'm going to stop breathing. This tends to be the pretty common one. Then it's like, then we know what to target. We're targeting like, maybe I'll stop breathing, maybe I won't. I don't know. I'm going to purposely distract myself so I don't notice my breathing to see what happens. Maybe I'll stop breathing. we're almost like egging the OCD on a little bit of like, oh, you want me to notice this? How about I do this instead? And each person does some mindfulness sometimes with this as well, depending on kind of the trajectory of it. I know I have a video. I think you have a video on this as well, Natasha. Sensory motor.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Those are hard ones. Yeah, and I love the way you handle both sides, right? Because it can show up in both ways. Sticky notes around the house. Are you breathing?
Yeah.
Are you still breathing? The Yap app, let it pop up on your screen. Breathing still? It's all about that awareness.
That's great. I know people have different apps that they'll use for that, or just reminders throughout the day, like, you still breathing? Just to, depending on the person, bring their awareness back to it of like, oh man, I went an hour without thinking about it. Now I'm, we want to say, let's take value away from it, whether you notice or not. That's kind of what we want to do.
You can translate that to the peeing too, right? Like, are you still, you haven't peed yet. Do you have to pee? Little sticky notes around the house. Do you have to pee? You feeling the pee? Because then you're inviting the discomfort, right? And then you're building those muscles.
For sure. So great to see Natasha in action. This is a OCD therapist. So.
Thank you, Patricia.
This person sending love to everyone struggling with OCD. You're awesome. We kind of talked about mental compulsions earlier, but how to use exposure and response prevention for mental compulsions. If it's a mental compulsion, usually the person is, we want to say like, you actually have all the power. You don't have the power maybe if the thoughts are coming through, but we have the power of how we're going to respond to it. And so if someone's doing a mental compulsion, they often are problem solving, whatever the fear is. Sometimes a mental compulsion is like, I have to think of this word 5 times or say this phrase a certain amount of times, or else something bad will happen. Usually I say like, let's mess it up, or we try not to do it at all. So if I'm counting to 5, I'm going to be like 5, 4, 1, 2, 9, 10, like completely mess up the compulsion. So the brain almost like screams like, you didn't do it right. If I'm problem solving, depending on the person, sometimes we pull out a piece of paper and I say, write down every thought that's coming in and we're just going to answer it. Yep, maybe not. Sure, that might happen. Cool, I hope that happens. Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks for joining the party. Like, just answering every single thought that comes in. And really saying, not just this time, but every time. Every time the thought comes back, it's going to know you're going to give it the exact same uncertainty answer. And so that it just knows, like, it doesn't turn into a mental compulsion anymore when we give it a complete wrong answer that it doesn't really want. At least that's how I kind of do ERP with it.
Yeah, and I would say also, there's showing up when OCD is knocking at your door, and then there's knocking at OCD's door. And so then, there's how to respond to those mental compulsions. Like you said, some really great ideas. But then there's also of like, it doesn't matter what kind of compulsion you have, whether it's avoidance, mental compulsion, physical compulsion. It's what's the core fear or theme underneath it in that moment, and then can I rock the boat on that, spontaneously, and that doing that is my mental compulsions to make sure nothing bad happens because I don't want my cat to escape the house. Then I might let the window open and I might do things around the house on purpose. And so sometimes it's a different question, not what can I do with mental compulsions, but what can I do with this theme or this fear that's showing up frequently as well. It's a two-parter.
Ooh, I like that. Mm-hmm. I know, real quick, trichotillomania, how to deal with it. I know I use the COMB model, the Comprehensive Behavioral Treatment model. I always get that and CBIT mixed up, but we usually say awareness training, be really aware when it's happening. We create competing responses. I know I'm going really fast through it. which means I'm going to get in the way of myself being able to do it, make it more inconvenient. So it could be, I notice every time I'm playing a video game, it happens. I'm going to put a Band-Aid on my finger, or I'm going to play with this fidget at this specific time because I know that I'm always triggered by it. I have a course that I recently released specifically for this. It's bfrbonline.com, BFRB. And I know, yeah, super, super quick. It's really hard to explain the whole treatment model, but it might be something to look at. Because I know at least the kind of the free version of it, you can see what the treatment all looks like and see if it's something that would be interesting for you. All right. Can you talk about the fear of bugs in kids and if we should try ERP or let it ride? How would you tackle it? I'm wondering if it's bug as in like sickness, or is it like maybe bugs? Like I'm actually scared of bugs? What would you say, Natasha?
I was thinking like bugs, crawly bugs.
Okay.
That was my first
inclination. That makes sense.
I had that. Yeah. And I think it depends on the level of the impact. Is it to the point where, a couple of my kids who have had bug phobias to the point where can't go outside, now we can't go swimming, we got to look at the pool. So if it's like impeding their ability to function, yeah, it's definitely worth doing. Doing like you would do any other ERP. Does a child have to like hold a spider and be comfortable with like a black widow? No, that'd be really scary. But we don't want them to, then have to check their bed every night and check their shoes every night in maybe an environment where that's not typical behavior. I mean, for us actually in Arizona, checking shoes is not a bad thing for scorpions. But I do feel like it just depends on the level that it's really impacting them.
Yeah, I love that. That's what I was thinking as well, is like, if it impacts the child's life, then we might do exposures. If it's just something that's like, oh, it's a bug, I don't want to see it, but they can still go outside regardless, it doesn't interfere, then it's like probably not as important. I know for me and my own children, anything they say like, I don't want to do this, I gently push towards it. And if they don't want to do it, they don't do it. That's okay. But I just know I want to give you the opportunity to face this anyway. That's kind of how I do it with my own kids. It doesn't always work out, obviously, but it's that interference in life is super, the part that I look at the most.
Yeah.
I'm having bad OCD to the point of having bad muscle spasms and twitches. What can I do about this? Man, I tell people, obviously, hopefully you're seeing a specialist, a therapist for this. Depending on the person, sometimes I say, well, maybe go get a physical. Make sure everything's okay in your body. And if the doctor gives you the okay, then you have that guideline that's like, oh, okay, then this is just solely OCD or anxiety that's causing this. It's really, really tough because everyone responds to this a little bit differently. But we know physical symptoms, like we talked about, can happen. And we know if there's more twitching and it's due to anxiety, then we say, well, let's just keep working on anxiety. Let's keep working on OCD. And if that's the case, then we know that these symptoms tend to reduce as well with it. We also look at medication as well, but the psychiatrist does that part to make sure that there isn't anything else interfering with it. There's another child question. Do they experience rage due to OCD? Do you discipline after the fact? What would you say?
I do not. Having a son who used to rage due to OCD, there's no awareness. And so it's, you always ask, what does the discipline serve? Is it serving for them to learn something so that they can do something different the next time? And if it was just they were out of control and dysregulated because their OCD was triggered, would disciplining that improve the situation next time? And it wouldn't, having lived that, my own experience. Does that mean that, like, if you threw, a shoe at your sister, or you ripped up your homework and there's shreds all over the floor, that you get a pass because it was OCD? No, it's like, when you're calm and everything, come down here, I'll help you pick up all these pieces, because there's natural consequences to the actions that we did. But disciplining it would say that they had a choice in that matter, that they chose to act that way. And kids who are in OCD storms are not choosing to act that way. It doesn't mean it's okay, but they're not choosing that.
I like that. I look at shame and guilt as well. Like, what purpose does that serve the children for, if they're not choosing that and we're bringing shame or guilt? They don't really learn from that experience, other than maybe I keep my OCD or anxiety more secret, so I don't want to talk about it because I get a bad experience afterwards.
And they're learning experiences, really. We will redo them. We'll talk about them later, and we'll say, I know that was really rough, and it was kind of scary the way you reacted. Next time, what can you do to calm down? So it can actually be a great learning tool over time. It's like seeds. Take a really long time to sprout, but they do.
I like that. I've been told I have scrupulosity. This is new to me. Now I have days where I doubt things about my faith and my belief. My mind always seems to want to contradict my faith. Is this normal? I would say without OCD, this is normal to question any faith, any belief. Because you think about any religion in this entire earth or world, we're all kind of just guessing anyway. I mean, with faith, that's what faith is all about. We're hoping, and we have faith towards something, and we're moving towards what we believe in. And so there's going to just be natural doubts. And I think if there weren't, then man, we've got really, really good faith. I haven't met anyone like that has zero doubts in some aspect or another. I know with scrupulosity, people have a lot of doubts and fears that come along with it. There's kind of a difference between a doubt and a fear mixed with all of that. And that's the part that I look at the most, especially with scrupulosity, is how am I responding to these when they come up? Is it just general thinking that I have, or is it like, I have to know, or now I'm a bad person because I contradicted my faith, or I'm not sure if it's normal? And, people are trying to figure it out so much, and they're feeling lots of anxiety and distress. Sometimes it's OCD related. Sometimes it's hard to know the difference sometimes, but just to know, like, we're all guessing, at least in my opinion. We're hoping, unless someone knows the answer and 100% and I just missed it. But I think we would all know at that point then. I watched your video on life after OCD and wanted to know if you can get past any type of OCD, no matter the obsession or compulsion. My answer is like, yeah, probably everything. In my opinion, like, it'd be hard to be like, you know what, you can get past everything except for scrupulosity. So like, that's pretty daunting. My opinion is, yeah. What do you think, Natasha?
Yeah, 100%. I think the foundation of how OCD shows up is the same, no matter what theme or fear or discomfort you want to plug in there. And when you fine tune those skills, then you learn how to manage it. It pops up, and then you manage it, and it pops up, and you have a good quality life, hopefully.
How do you work with somebody who has OCD that involves or everyday risk with contamination? How is this dealt with or treated? I can kind of share an example. I remember working with somebody that worked at like a power plant, and like there's risk to contamination, and that actually was one of their OCD fears. And so we spent a lot of time coming up with guidelines what does the job say about it? Do they say I need to wash my boots every single day? Do they say I need to wash my hands 10 times? Do they say that I can't touch this? I need to wear these certain gloves? I tended to go to whatever the guideline, the book is that the work says is a risk of some kind. And that's what we follow. Anything past that, we're willing to risk and say, I know they didn't tell me to wash my hands, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so, wait a second, that's not part of the guideline. Maybe that's something we're willing to risk with that. And so for me, I say that's one of those things. It's okay to gain that guideline and set goals for, I'm only sticking to this, and then hope I'm right, but we can never be 100% sure. I think that's the tough part. What can I do if I get in a moment where I feel so out of control, cannot stop the compulsions at all? It is so exhausting and frustrating. How can you help me out? Yeah, what do you think, Natasha? People are so out of control.
Well, I think sometimes we want it all to go away. And so the goal is too big. It's like trying to climb a ladder, but you want to get to the top ring. And so sometimes it's self-compassion and say, today I'm going to notice these things. I'm going to notice my compulsions. I'm going to notice how often I'm doing them. I'm going to notice how I feel when I'm doing it. And that's progress. That's a step on the rung. You just got on the ladder. And then it's like, maybe tomorrow I'm going to see if I can delay it. Maybe even, 30 seconds. That's another rung on the ladder. And so I think it's just getting on that ladder and starting to climb it, which I know is easier said than done. But I think sometimes we look at the whole thing and we're like, oh my gosh, I can never stop this. That's not where you start.
I like that. Can feel very all or nothing sometimes.
Yeah.
I know it sounds silly, but sometimes I say, if you get to a point where you're just so stuck and you don't know where to go from here, I say, go like this with your arms until you can't do it anymore. And it sounds so weird, but it's like, I bet you could see how long you can go with that. It's essentially exercising to give you what you're really doing. But there's a point where you get so exhausted that the brain, sometimes there's that logic that comes in oh yeah, you're supposed to use this treatment skill. But it's enough to just kick you out of the moment. It's not something that's I have to use this 5 times a day to feel okay. It's kind of I'm really stuck and I'm going to try this for the moment. And then it's not to reduce anxiety. It's to say, whew, I'm going to see if I can maybe release some chemicals that maybe aren't there, and then see if that helps in any way to build that motivation towards treatment. Yeah, I've tried that. I've done that with somebody before. We went 20 something minutes with it in the session. Yeah, but by the time we were done, we were laughing, we were smiling. They almost completely forgot about all the intrusive thoughts that were coming in. And it wasn't the purpose to distract from them, but it was to say, we really are stuck. Let's try something different right now. And totally works in those moments.
Well, doing those physical things too, it's like motor control. It's motor planning for some of us, one of those things.
Is existential OCD too abstract to treat? My brain tells me nothing is real, so I shouldn't even try. Man, that can feel so overwhelming. Well, I think anything's treatable. Any type of OCD, kind of like we mentioned before, there isn't one that's you give up on this one because it feels so out of control. I say we still do it. When people, in my opinion, start losing, they don't have that logic that comes in that says, oh yeah, I keep questioning all these things. I don't know where to go from here. And I keep trying all these treatment strategies and just nothing seems to be working. Sometimes I say maybe that's a time to look at talking to a psychiatrist to see if medication will help bring a little insight into treatment. That's one of those things I see, especially with existential OCD, where it brings a little more maybe logic or insight. It's not going to fix everything, but helps with that treatment. So we try not to figure out this one's real, this one's not. This idea is real, this one's not. Because when we start doing that, people get more tangled and stuck into that OCD. And so it's a tough one, though. We want to just enjoy life, so we focus on the present moment. How can I enjoy life right now? What can I do? I have heart anxiety, maybe health anxiety, but also do dance and football for hours. It's a lot of effort. My question is, if someone has a heart problem, can they do football for an hour? Any tips to get out of this? There's kind of a difference between like a heart problem and like anxiety that I might have a heart problem. So, I don't know, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think we'd need more information because there is a difference between a racing heart and then giving you reassurance, like, yes, you can do this for an hour, your heart will be okay, which, we always have to ask, is that anxiety or OCD asking for that reassurance? So always, go see your doctor. But I think we'd need more information to really give it a solid answer.
Yeah. I had a heart ablation the beginning of this year, and, got guidelines from the doctor. I mean, it was an actual heart problem. And he said, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, cool. So if I still have anxiety, which I do sometimes, I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm making this heart problem come back. And sometimes I actually feel it. I'm like, I remember he told me I could do whatever I want. So until I see a problem, I'm not willing to fix it or change anything of what I'm doing, which sometimes is a hard place to be, but we got to stick to the guideline, whatever it is. And which my body does, it says like, you're working too hard, you're riding this bike too hard, your heart's going too fast. Remember last time? I'm saying, he told me to do whatever I want, so I'm going to keep going. That's how we sometimes get past that anxiety, is like, stick to that guideline. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to really know when there's an actual problem, which is sometimes a hard place to be in, because we want to make sure there isn't a problem, but we can't always do that. I keep telling myself that OCD is a lie, but I keep doing the compulsion. So do you think logic works, Natasha?
I would have to say no.
I wish it did.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we might see kind of on an Instagram post, or like, OCD's a liar and things like that. But we tend to not use that very often as like, I got to keep telling my brain it's a lie and that's going to work. It doesn't seem to work so well. It's like, I might identify as that, and then what am I going to do after that point? Am I going to engage in treatment? Am I going to stop doing the compulsion and risk whatever I think is going to happen? Because we know the compulsion tends to just continue happening unless we change something physically about what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it's not about whether it's a lie or not, because most people with OCD are highly intelligent and they know intellectually that what OCD is telling them is not true. They have the insight, but that doesn't stop the desire to do the compulsion to get that relief. And so it's really what you do with the compulsion, not the thought, right? So I'm going to sit with this discomfort, whether it is or not true, and I'm going to not do this compulsion, or I'm going to do this and I'm not going to avoid. And that's where I think the progress will be.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. That's great. Magical thinking, OCD. How do I deal with this, especially about preventing bad things from happening? I always say life is risky. We never know what's going to happen. With magical thinking, we tend to have an idea, and then we just follow along with it, and so I better do something about it, or else something bad's going to happen. I usually, without using reassurance or logic, I usually say, well, how often has something actually happened? And a lot of people feel like it didn't happen because I did something about it. I tapped this thing 5 times, or I had this positive thought after. But we say, for me, I always say, let's risk it. Let's not tap today. Let's not fix the thought. And then see what happens. Did everything end up being okay? Did it not? I know we can never be 100% sure about it. But I know when people have those experiences, it's like, nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened. The brain finally learns that, like, wait, I don't have that much power. I thought I did. But it needs to learn that usually through experience. So we don't prevent bad things from happening unless we see that immediate danger. We don't have to question that much when we know something bad could potentially happen. But we're willing to risk a lot of things in life. I think that's the tough part.
And the sad thing is, but the reality is we just don't have control. And OCD would love to tell us that we do have control, and we don't. And so just in case, I'll just do it just in case. And then if you don't do it, yes, you may see that nothing bad happens, or OCD will find something as proof. See, you didn't do it, and look what happened. You had a really bad day. And I think the question is, but could you survive it? Was it livable? Could you handle the discomfort? Whatever happened, could you handle it? Because you're going to have to handle it anyway, whether you tap or say something in your head. You don't have that magic power that OCD is telling you to. But can you live with the discomfort? Most of the time, yes.
I love that. I think we sometimes need to expect that bad things are going to happen, but we don't make connections. That it's because I had this thought, or it's because I didn't do this, which is so easy to do. But we say, wait a second. Like, I think I used this example before. Like, if I had to stand in front of Judge Judy and prove that that's absolutely true, could I do it? I can't say, I had this thought and this happened. She's just going to laugh us out of the courtroom. Be like, okay, well, where's the evidence here? Like, you're condemning yourself before we even know if that's true or not, which is the whole idea of uncertainty. Like, we don't know. And that's okay to just say, I don't know if that thought had any impact on it, but I'm not going to put my eggs all in one basket and say yes or no. I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe. It's a really hard answer to give with it, especially when it feels so risky.
And, just to add one more little thing on this, when you're comfortable and you've kind of climbed that ladder and you feel like you could do it, then you do the opposite of what magical thinking is. My daughter and I know this is going to sound really weird. We were talking about this in my podcast, but when we go to bed at night, she had magical thinking where she had to say, I'll see you in the morning, and then nothing bad will happen. And it was her idea. She's 9. And she says, Mom, I won't see you in the morning. And I say, I won't see you in the morning too. And it makes me very uncomfortable with my own anxiety. But that's the reverse magical thinking. So that's a high ERP, but really effective.
Yeah,
I still sleep
that. Yeah, you experience that every single morning. I think that's the cool part about it. Thank you so much for what you do to help people with OCD. I tried your method about false memory. Maybe it's happening or not. Great at first, but after a few days, worse thoughts happened. So I know when we're doing exposures, I tend to see a kind of a peak of symptoms, and then they start to fall. Because that means we're facing something that we haven't been facing. We're finally jumping into that cold water. It's going to feel really uncomfortable at the beginning and maybe even feel really bad, but then it gets better over time. And so it's kind of to be expected that, symptoms might get worse right at the beginning, but I'm going to stay diligent with whatever mindset I have with the exposures. But I just know that things are going to get better, and just kind of wait for it. And so we don't give up when the thoughts get worse, because we know that's like really when we want to work on the treatment for most people. Is thoughts are getting worse. That just means you got OCD in the corner, and it wants you to give up, wants you to stop. And so we don't want to stop.
And the gauge a lot of times isn't to look at the O part of OCD. Am I having more obsessive thoughts? It's to look at the C part. Am I able to handle this without doing my compulsions? Yeah, because like I think, like the floodgates come, but then it's like, am I starting to build those muscles? And you go to the gym and initially you are sore. You feel worse. You don't feel healthy. You can't even walk. But you're building muscle. And then over time you can handle that discomfort. I think the same thing when you're doing ERP.
That's great. We're going to answer a few more questions. I know as we get closer to the end, if you can, I say this each time, but copy and paste your question into the comments, because I try to go back through and answer as many as I can that we didn't get to. And so I would do that now before we end, because then this all kind of disappears for a while and then they'll come back. But yeah, I want to be able to answer what I can. I recognize your picture. You've asked some questions before, but how do you distinguish intrusive thoughts from effortful thinking? I look at anxiety as the big indication. If I'm feeling anxiety, I might be having intrusive thoughts. If I'm just thinking, and I'm like intensive thinking, it's just thinking. And I can let it down. I can just be done with it when I want to. I just say, oh, I'm really tired of thinking of this. I'm going to go play a video game or whatever people do. But when it's an intrusive thought, it's like you cannot move forward until you figure this thought out. That's kind of how I distinguish the two. What should I do when my thoughts get so twisted? Sometimes this is tough because certain thoughts people have are like, well, this one's real bad. This one's worse than everyone else's. This one is something I can't work on. But for me, we treat every thought, no matter what it is, even if it feels really twisted, the same as any other thought somebody might have, to kind of put it all on the same levels. Like, I'm putting the idea or the power of twisted on there, for example, when really just a thought is a thought, which is hard to do, but yeah. What are some good exposures for false memory OCD? This one can be sometimes kind of tough to do. Each person has their own, but I don't know if you work with this very often, Natasha.
Not as often as other things with kids. Yeah.
Yeah, because usually when they're kids, they're not questioning things from the past or even present too often. Yeah, it's pretty short. I know, depending on the person, but exposures tend to be, let's not figure it out. Let's not figure out if the memory is true, if it's false, if it really happened, if it didn't happen. And people sometimes have to be really committed. I'm not going to figure this one out. It might be real and I might have missed something really great that I'm supposed to learn and know, but I'm going to choose to not figure this one out. And sometimes just giving it a simple answer of like, yeah, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Yeah, because it might be like, but if it's true, then that means you need to turn yourself in. Or, whatever the thoughts, like they escalate pretty quick. And we just kind of give it the same thing. Yeah, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. I've chosen to not figure this one out. And that tends to be an exposure for a lot of people. Is like, can I stay with that mindset? Maybe even write scripts for it, worry scripts. That what happens if it's real? What does it actually mean for me? I'm going to write the story out as if it's true and say, yeah, totally. That's awesome. So glad that happened. That's great. Like it's changing the whole reaction somebody has because of something like that. I'm going to start going off meds for OCD. I'm scared it will be just as bad as it was before meds. I saw this and I just thought real quick, talk to your psychiatrist. Make sure it's something that is appropriate for you. Have you seen kids or anyone get off of medication for OCD, Natasha?
Yeah, I think they have to really build those muscles, and really have their skills locked down. And but they do it, consulting their psychiatrist, and some stay on, medication for a very long extended period of time, just because of their quality of life is better. So it's definitely something to just talk to your doctor about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually say, because we can't say like, yeah, get off that medication or don't or whatever. It's really, in my mind, if someone's not on a medication, treatment has to be at the forefront. Like, I got those skills down, I can do it. And if not, then usually symptoms tend to start coming back. And so it's like, I'm so confident, I've got this treatment, I'm willing, I'm dedicated to do it every single day. That's usually when I see people sometimes get off of a medication. And then sometimes they get right back on because they're like, oh yeah, symptoms just skyrocketed and I realized it helped me the whole time. So that's something to always be aware of. My daughter will not take fluoxetine as her OCD keeps interfering. What should I do? She won't listen to logic. Is there anything that you do for the kiddos that you work with, or even parents, to help them?
Well, it depends on what her age is, but I think a lot of it is that we're just kind of, I say this a lot, so it can sound really cheesy, but we're just passengers on their journey. And so, if she's tween or teen, it's like, it's not kind of putting our will on her. It's getting her to see how is this impacting your life? What is OCD robbing you of? What do you want to do that you can't do? And it might be just starting with a lot of education and motivation. And sometimes you have to figure out where that entry point is, which it could be a back door of, you love horses and you want to do this, and maybe it can get you to that. Yeah, but it's, and sometimes OCD will try to hijack that and be, if you have issues with poison or medicine, it can actually make it a theme. And so you have to deal with that. You can do exposures around that. I've worked with quite a few kids who wouldn't take it, not because they're not wanting help, but because they think it's part of their theme. So we do a lot of ERP around the theme before we do the medication aspect of it.
Yeah, that's great. And we often can do treatment specifically on this, just like you mentioned. I have the fear of taking medication, and we're not saying, oh, go take all this medication for exposure. It's working with a therapist or specialist to like, let's not necessarily like, I'm going to use all logic in the world to convince you, but let's experience, or take the risk at some point if the doctor says that's something you need. And do exposures with that. And I know, just like working with any kid, like we don't shame or guilt for it, because then it tends to like pull them away even further, which I know is so hard as a parent to be like, I know better than you. But we just have to know that, yeah, they're on their own journey, and we love and support the best that we can. So I know we're coming right at the end here, but do we have time for one more? Let's see. Just kind of a success. I actually thought was great. I had OCD as a kid. It became much worse after trauma, along with dissociation, but I'm so much healthier now. So I love to see these, because sometimes people are like, well, what do I do? It's never going away. But like, that's awesome, Kayla. Thanks for sharing. All right. Do this health anxiety one. That's all right. Can you please give an example of ERP for health anxiety, the fear of dying? I'm unsure where the line of reacting to a compulsion and ERP is. This can be really hard, because we're definitely all on that journey through life. That's part of life. That's what happens. And every person's so different with this, but health anxiety, I treat the same as OCD. We use those exposures with it of how can I be more uncertain about this? Because we never know. We never know what's going to happen with life. And if I'm trying to control so much, I'm missing out on actually living life right now. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Natasha.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said, and it depends on how it shows up. You know, my oldest daughter has health anxiety, and you know, we sit with discomfort. Mom, will this kill me? I don't know. Let's just try. You know, let's just eat that, and we'll see what happens. Or, you know, so I think some of it is resigning to the fact that none of us get to control. There's one thing that's for certain in life, is that we will all die. But I think it's looking at how it shows up for you, whether you are asking a lot of questions or looking at that, what your health anxiety wants, and then reducing that or not avoiding that, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. You know, I know when we use a lot of maybe, maybe not statements, we're going to know, like if I'm in the middle of the road and there's a car coming straight at me, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, this car may or may not hit me. It might, you know, it might take my life. But it's like, there's no question about it. I got to get out of the way. That's when I'm reacting. And it's not a compulsion to react to something like that. But when I'm just sitting here and I'm like, I had a thought. I don't know if something's going to happen today. Sometimes I say, like, look around you. There's nothing happening. Then we know maybe there's a false signal being sent. And we're willing to risk it. And I think that sometimes is the hard part, is we've got to risk those things. And just be realistic with life of like, we're enjoying what we've got right in front of us right now. That's the idea and importance of life, is enjoy the moments, what we've got.
And you can use a little humor with it. I mean, depending on how extreme you want to get. You know, I like the sticky notes, and we'll put sticky notes around the house, like knock knock, who's going to die today? You know, and Grim Reaper pictures. I mean, it depends on how extreme you want to get. But if really dying is your theme, not just health anxiety, like what's that lump or whatever, but I'm going to die, I don't want to die. Eventually you can bore your brain, where your brain is like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm seeing like little sticky notes about death, and my mom's texting me or my friend's texting me weird death poems. I mean, you can get creative and fun with it, so that eventually your brain is like, I'm so dumb. I'm so tired of that topic.
Yeah, love that. Love that. There's an app. I think it's called WeCroak. I don't remember, but I installed that and I forgot it was on there, and I kept getting all these notifications like, you're gonna die. Like, it's just random stuff. And I'm like, what in the world is this? I eventually turned it off, but like, that's a really good example of like, I get so exposed to this and I'm just like, turns into something funny instead of something scary.
And that did bother me, that WeCroak. I mean, I just put it on my iPad just to see what it would be like for other people I work with. And I was like, whoa, like this is really upsetting me. And after a while, like you said, I'm like, this is so stupid. It's like, how do I get this off? So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh. Well, good. Well, I know, you know, I'm so glad that Natasha is here to do this. She works so much with parents and kids, like, and I don't know if you, like, we talked about your YouTube channel earlier, like videos every single week. It's awesome, all the stuff that you do. I know your Instagram page, if I got this right.
Yeah.
Like, really good content on there, like pretty often. And if you were like, if I had a kid, I'd probably like go to you. I mean, I have kids, but kids with anxiety, I'd be like, your resources are amazing. You even have courses, right?
I do.
That's the website, if I got that correct. So where you can find all the courses that you have, like self-directed, I believe, and
I've got courses to teach parents how to help their kids, because really we're in the trenches 24/7. So my courses are how to teach your child how to crush anxiety, how to teach your child how to crush OCD, social anxiety, all that fun stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I love it. It's amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know I always have my course I promote at the end as well, but it's kind of self-directed for OCD and anxiety online. You can go there. The links are in the description. I also put your website in there for people to go into and check it out. Because I know therapists are hard to find, which I know seems strange. Someone challenged me on that, like, yeah, right, I can find an OCD therapist. And we were like, actually, there are 2 in your area, and the waiting list is like 6 months. So that's what we mean. It's really hard, especially as parents. Like, we don't even know what we're doing as parents anyway. At least I don't. But when it comes to anxiety, like, yeah, you got to go to people like Natasha who like do this every day. And so that's great.
Thanks.
So like I said, if you have any comments that we weren't able to get to or questions, please. If you miss it now, like copy and paste it into the comments. They come back in about 24 hours. You can go back and do it so I can answer you specifically. But yeah, thanks so much. Any other thoughts, Natasha, before we end?
No, I appreciate chatting with you. I love what you put out, and it's so helpful. I refer so many people to your videos. So thank you for doing you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And appreciate it. And maybe I'll have you back on if you'd love to come back.
Always.
Okay.